You're listening to I Communicate with your host, Mark Altman, on Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN. Once again, here's Mark.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, here with Karen Henderson, GM of Westboro TV, and Kathy Stoker, English and journalism teacher at Westboro High School. Karen, I want to start with you coming out of the break. I'd love to know, as a former school committee member and as a parent to 4 teenagers, if you had a magic wand and you could change the school system, maybe in Westboro, maybe in general, what are some topics that you wish could be taught in schools that aren't really taught in favor of some other core topics, subjects?
Right. Well, that's a great question. I mean, certainly one of the things that we focus on, and I think that they are doing a great job with, and it's been great that Kathy and I have been able to work on it, are these communication skills and soft skills. And I think the schools are doing that, but I'm really surprised at how much the kids need those skills. I mean, that's surprising to me. I just think that the rules of communication have changed so much. So I think their ability to write and read and comprehend, and then also to communicate all of that. And again, we're not just talking literature and fiction and nonfiction, but you're talking about actual people-to-people skills. And I do think even from a young age, we've been trying to teach the kids that. But it's surprising to me how much a part of the curriculum it's had to become, again, partially due to the influx of all the social media and the technology, and that we've gone from talking in paragraphs and sentences to single letters and acronyms and emojis and pictures. And I really feel as if kids need those skills and the ability to have that. We've talked about, you and I, Mark, before, the conversation stamina. It's reading stamina, it's comprehension stamina, the ability to be in a conversation and really engage with someone for a long period of time. So I joke a little bit, but my kids will, if I start sending them a text and it goes on for too long and I go into any kind of a paragraph and they use that term, you're just being extra, Mom, because they've really gone to single words, right? Or pictures or emojis or even single letters. Don't type okay, it's just K. So it's a challenge to get them to really describe something to us. We'll say it a lot, use your words. And that's just kind of fascinating to have seen. I mean, my husband recently got a Snapchat account, I think because he was kind of being an anthropologist and studying these creatures. It's like he wanted to connect with those kids and see a little bit of what are you doing on that and what's it all about. And it's been fascinating to him because in some ways they're communicating so much, right? That Snapchat thing for teenagers, especially, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and yet not really communicating at all, right?
Very little substance.
Very little substance.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting because I don't think that they see it that way. I think some of those rules of communication have really changed and changed very quickly. I mean, the decline in conversation stamina has been precipitous in my view.
So, Kathy, in your classroom, when you look at kids who struggle to read body language or who struggle to articulate their feelings and emotions, are there specific examples of in your classroom that you see this kind of thing rearing? I know you see it, but how do you see it showing up?
Right. So to tag team off of what you were saying, Karen, as we're seeing that increase in or decrease in use of language, I think we're also seeing an increase in depression and anxiety with students. And there's a lot of research coming out that's directly related to social media. So in the classroom, often that translates into, in some cases with students, not making eye contact, not knowing how to give a firm handshake or give a, hi, how are you today, Mrs. Stoker? So a lot of it is modeling that behavior from an English teacher, showing whether it's video, film, TED Talks, looking at literature and discussing how people communicate, and then modeling it for the students and asking them to model, and that's, again, we're in broadcast journalism, it's really fun to give scenarios and ask them to model and to talk about, why is this uncomfortable to make eye contact with someone? Why is it difficult to sit up straight and have more of an open posture? So a lot of it's through modeling that I'm seeing the changes.
And ladies, I think the challenge is let's take eye contact for a minute. You can say someone who doesn't make eye contact, you can tell a child that someone who doesn't make eye contact appears to be lacking confidence, could be hiding something. It could have all these perceptions. But for kids to process the consequences of those things at a high school and certainly at a middle school age, they can't see it. Like, they just don't realize. And I think that's part of our challenge as adults is how do we, especially as a teacher, Kathy, how do we get them to realize the consequences without us telling them, because they'll very often tune that out.
Right. So often, again, it's through examples. And I think working with Karen, I know I keep coming back to that, but that's a real life experience they're having, going down to Westboro TV, a professional studio, working with adults, professional staffs of all different personalities. And so that is their consequence. I have had students, I had one specifically a few years ago who contacted me and said, thank you for going over how to give a proper handshake, because she said that she was hired and her manager directly complimented her and said,
Wow.
Of all the people I interviewed, you had the best handshake. And she said, I would have never believed in high school when I had a 5-minute lesson and the teacher telling me that it will matter someday, that would have any kind of impact on my future. So I think it's those types of messages.
So a question for both of you. I'm going to start with Karen. My experience in working with a lot of parents is, if I was to ask a parent, when your child graduates from high school and you were to do a self-assessment on your parenting job as they head off in their future,
Please no.
how are you going to, I say to parents, how do you evaluate if you did a good job parenting? And I hear a lot of parents say, well, did they get accepted to a good college? And, are they paving the way for a future, and so on and so forth? To me, that's not the right answer. And so I guess both as parents, I know, Kathy, you're a parent of two, but Karen, starting with you, what is your barometer? What are your metrics for measuring your parenting ability?
Right. It's pretty interesting. Certainly, you get to kind of how your kids, how well adjusted they are, right? How happy they seem, how content they seem, how comfortable with themselves they seem. But there is that barometer of how do they communicate with other people? Are they, do they have the ability to be empathetic and sympathetic and have conversations with people where they really engage and connect with people? And that's really important in our house, the ability to be part of, whether it's your family community or your community at large, and connecting with people within that. That's really important to us. And a big part of that is the ability to really care and to communicate with people. And so that certainly is one of the barometers for me.
So let me ask you this, Karen. I also find that our own kids tend to tune us out, and they, you have this experience where you'll tell your child something, and then another adult will tell them, and they'll be like, Mom, so-and-so told me. And you're like, wait, I've been telling you that for 2 years.
Sure.
So my question for you, Karen, and as a follow-up is, how important do you think it is for your children to have an outside voice, an adult mentor, role model outside their home, or teachers certainly qualify, but outside their home, because you need that other influence, don't you think?
Sure, absolutely. The more role models they can have, the more people who are important in your kids' lives, the better. So certainly teachers can fill that role. And I think a lot of times you get coaches,
Definitely.
Obviously, who, and you're kind of hoping for someone who is either giving them another perspective or reinforcing some of what you're saying. Sometimes they act like they're not hearing it from you, but we know they're hearing a lot of what we say.
Agreed.
They just can't necessarily go along with it, right? There's a little bit of pride there.
And Kathy, what about you? What are your metrics for your parenting?
Right. I think that adage, it takes a village, from the get-go. My children were in part-time daycare, and I had to depend on the daycare providers to, teach the kids values and support our values as well. So I feel like from a young age, you have to create that village of people for your children. And then certainly for my students, I want my students to network. We talk about networking, so important, and to create your own group of people that you can look up to and ask for support. I also think that it's important. Dr. Brené Brown, she talks about children are hardwired for struggle. And I think one of my barometers, how do my children respond in times of struggle? Do they know how to reach out and connect for help? And are they independent where needed to solve their own problems as well? And to find that balance, which I think is really hard as adults to do. But if we can at least start to teach our children those skills, our teenagers those skills, what to do and not to fall apart in what I call a first world problem situation, and how to persevere using your village when there's a real struggle.
Well, when we come back for our third segment, we're going to build on what Kathy's talking about: perseverance, grit, resiliency, call it what you want. But I would argue that that is the number one metric in my world for my kids. And I think it's essential, because when things get rough, how do you respond? So we will continue to talk about that. Kathy Stoker, Karen Henderson, I am Mark Altman, and we'll be back after the break.